Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from Newslaundry.
Hello and welcome to NL Interviews. I am Meghnad and I am here today with a man who has been causing waves over the past week. He is an investigative journalist. You might know him from his other reports which he has done. But this time he has hit it out of the park because he has decided to mess with a bunch of politicians. All of them basically, and the government and everyone else involved. He has been doing a series on electoral bonds. We will get to what electoral bonds are in a bit. But you can read his 5-part series in Newslaundry Hindi, and you can also see how he has been going after it like a dog with a bone, right? Please welcome Nitin Sethi. Hi Nitin, how are you doing?
Exhausted but doing well.
Doing well, yeah. You seem very exhausted in general. Today morning I read your tweet at 5 o'clock saying see you in 2 hours, I'm going to sleep.
Yeah, I forgot to sleep.
You forgot to sleep, yeah. You have published 5 parts now of this series. And how long did it take you to do this story?
So there were 2 parts to it. The series is based on a bunch of documents, I would say a cache of documents that was brought out by Commodore Lokesh Batra, who's retired and is a transparency activist. It took him about roughly 1 year, 11 months to get the documents out. And
1 year, 11 months?
Yes. He's been pursuing it almost 3 months after the government announced the creation of electoral bonds.
Which is in 2017.
2017 right. January.
Yeah.
And so it took him a lot of time. And once he had got the documents out, he shared it with us, and it took us about 3 months to read through what is more than about 700 pages of government files from different ministries and stitch together and find out what the truth was.
And that has now translated into a 5-part crisp investigative report.
So I would say what we've been able to do, because we were a small team who was leading it, Newslaundry included, HuffPost leading it, a Malayalam website also are picking it up, was frankly I think we've still just got 60% of what exists in those documents.
Right.
And this was scary enough for us. I thought we should stop here before we scare ourselves out of it.
Right. So for our audiences, I think we should take it right from the basics.
Sure.
Let's just talk about first what electoral bonds are, right? So can you just tell us what electoral bonds are in general?
So it's in some sense a new currency that's been floated. The currency is simple. If I want to donate to a political party, I go to a bank, I buy a piece of paper which is called the electoral bond. I deposit the money with SBI for that. In this case, I take that piece of paper, give it over quietly to a political party without anyone coming to know. The political party deposits it in its account and it gets the money from SBI for it.
So this paper you are defining, which is a bond,
yes.
What would it look like?
Well, it looks like almost like a post office savings certificate, frankly,
okay.
On the face of it.
Okay.
It does not carry the name of the person who's bought it, or it does not carry the name of the political party to which it would be given. Therefore, it is called a bearer bond.
Right.
So anyone can buy it, can pass it around to somebody else, and who can then X person can give it to Y, Y can give it to Z, and Z can give it to a political party.
Like a currency.
Like a currency note.
And the amount, is it restricted on this? Like, is there a limit that you can have on this bond?
So, just like a currency or a note, it has different denominations, but you can buy as much as you want.
Right.
And you can deposit as much as you want with a political party, and they can encash it.
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, so I buy a bond and I take it to a political party of my choice. And I have to buy it from SBI if I'm not wrong.
Yes, there are designated branches of SBI across the country from where you can buy them.
So I buy that bond from SBI, I give it to a political party, and then the political party goes to this to SBI and then encashes it. Right. So basically the account is, there's an account just transfer happening.
Yeah, there's a transfer of money happening from one hand to the political party.
Right. So what is the problem with this?
Well, let's start with what the government at least claimed this bond would be.
Right.
The government said the bond served 2 purposes. You could only buy purportedly this bond by either a check or a demand draft or through a digital transfer from your bank account to SBI.
Right.
That the government claimed would ensure there was no cash being used in politics. Two, that nobody else would ever come to know who bought the bond and who it was given to. That it would remain in some sense anonymous. Oddly, the government said this is a form of transparency, but that we can get to later. But it says nobody would come to know who's given how much money to which party, because the government claimed that some donors have come to us and said people cannot give different parties money because they fear retribution from the others if they come to power.
So if I'm giving like money to a political party, basically I might get harassed, right?
Yes.
So like if I give it to the Congress, BJP might come after me, or if I give it to the BJP, Congress might come after me.
Depending on who's in power and who's not.
Right.
So based on these two core principles that the government claimed it was doing it for, it created this thing which allowed, therefore, in government's view, banked money to go into political parties and remain secret of who had given to whom. No institution in India, it claimed, and no citizen would ever come to know who had given the money to which political party.
So in your investigations, have you found instances where it's justified that, you know, certain donor got harassed by a certain party and therefore that donor needed to be anonymous?
So as far as I know, and we have looked for this, there is no recorded history of any corporate having ever claimed that on record. I can understand why they may not have.
Yeah.
But there is nothing available on government files, and we're talking of government files from the point of where the concept of electoral bonds was created to begin with, to the point where we've now sold more than 6,200 crores worth of bonds. There is not an iota of a line from anyone in those government files saying we are being harassed or we fear being harassed, therefore create a secret channel for us.
One instance of harassment that comes to mind is Aam Aadmi Party, right? So Aam Aadmi Party, when it made its donations transparent, they had claimed that, you know, our donors are being harassed, and some people had actually come out and said that Congress during that time was also like setting income tax officials after them, or like CBI after them, etc. So there is an element of
I mean, it's quite likely that these things happen quietly and they've happened endlessly.
Right.
But I think one needs to step back and wonder what is the role of big donors in electoral politics vis-a-vis the citizens' rights.
Right. We'll get to that.
Sure.
But so in your story, the fifth part, I think you have spoken about donors here,
yes.
right? Like how you did not find any evidence of harassment there. But as in harassment to justify this move by the government. But one thing that I think needs to be pointed out here.
So if I may step in, sorry. What we didn't find was, as I said, nobody writing in. But what we found was actually the government eventually at the end of 2 years very reluctantly going on record to reply on an RTI, literally forced to reply to an RTI saying nobody ever approached us.
Oh,
and this is in contrast to the speech that the then Finance Minister Arun Jaitley gave in Parliament, saying one of the reasons I'm doing this is because donors have come to us and said we fear that if we donate, others will harass us.
Right.
So in 2 years' time, forced to tell the truth, this is the Finance Ministry itself saying nobody ever told us, we've done it on our own.
Okay. So I'll get to one point that you raised here, that the electoral bond can only be bought by DD, check or bank transfer, right? Now one of the arguments here is that earlier a lot of cash donations were coming in which were anonymous anyway. So what is the problem with an electoral bond? Because now it's ensuring only white money comes into the bank accounts of political parties, right? I mean, it also logically makes sense that way, that, you know, if your one intention is of course harassment, let's keep that aside. But another reason that they're given is reduction of black money in politics.
Absolutely.
So do you think this instrument works as a reduction of black money in politics?
It absolutely does not. And let me try to explain this to you. What did we have before the electoral bonds? We did have a cash-based system where a lot of parties would get cash. And that cash would come to big and small parties. It would be collected below 20,000 rupees if anyone paid. They didn't need to tell who was getting it.
20,000 was the limit.
20,000 was the limit. The difference was, again, this is something that the BJP has played up even during demonetization, and it's completely false. It's actually a lie. You can have black money which is in cash, or you can have black money which is sitting inside somebody's accounts.
Right.
Now, that 20,000 limit also allowed small donors to give 200 rupees that they might have earned in a year. It allowed people to just make different people pay 20,000 black money, 10,000 people giving 20,000 each, etc. accumulating. Now that was the case and it needed to be reformed. There is no doubt about it. What the government instead did was reduce the limit for the cash. So it said only 2,000 rupees and below can you give in cash.
Right.
That only impacted smaller parties largely.
So, just one context for the audience. So, when we are talking about 2,000 rupees in cash, what we mean is 2,000 rupees if you give, you don't have to reveal your name.
Exactly.
Like your receipt,
Yes.
you don't have, the party doesn't have to give a receipt.
Exactly.
But if it's above 2,000, then you have to give a receipt
And
for
you
the
have to
cash
name
donation.
them.
And you have to name them. Right. Okay, go on.
So, what that needed a reform, but what the government has done instead is, it's allowed the cash to exist at a certain level, but it created a completely opaque channel of providing money through banks. Now, the difference is most people like to claim from the ruling party that if it comes from a bank account, it's pure white, right? But the fact is, this government itself has gone after so-called Benami accounts, shell companies, which are nothing but money laundering, turning black money into white, bringing money, rerouting money from outside India, overseas India, into India, refunneling them into the system without paying taxes. Now, what is black money? Black money is anything you've earned without paying taxes on top of it, which should have been due otherwise.
Right.
Now, what electoral bonds allow you to do is set up shell companies. Companies and this government...
Like the electoral bonds don't allow it, like shell companies can be set up.
The concomitant, no, actually the concomitant amendments made in the law around the time they created in 2017 the electoral bond undid a rule that existed at that time. At that time, no company could pay more than 7.5% of the revenues on an average it had earned in the last 3 years.
Right.
What it did was made sure that these were legit companies actually earning something and giving a little bit out of that to political party.
7% निकाल के दे दिया.
7.5% दे दो, इससे ज़्यादा मत देना, because अब कौन देना चाहेगा अगर असली धंधा कर रहा है.
Right.
But what this government did was take away that limit. It said you can give anything. You may not even be earning a penny really, not doing any business, as long as you're registered as a company. Money can be funneled through that company endlessly and be given to anyone.
So now I can create a company and give 100% of whatever is in the bank accounts of that company to a party.
So you could actually set up 5 companies. You could set up a company in Mauritius, one in Ukraine, one in another tax haven, and couple in India. And you can keep routing money through these down into the account from which you eventually create a electoral bond. And nobody would ever know where that money originally came from. And it was well-earned wealth or was it black money? And this is classic case of international black money movement that the world over we are discussing these days. And Mr. Modi himself as Prime Minister said, I'll go after this. I mean, whether he's gone or not is debatable, but that was his claim, that he'll go after these shell companies.
They have shut down a bunch of companies who do this, right?
They try and do this once in a while.
So, I mean, if you look at it simultaneously, if they are shutting down shell companies and also introducing electoral bonds.
So, I would, again, that shutting down of shell companies is doubtful for the fact that if they were shell companies, they were in contravention of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. If they were to be shut down, first there should have been prosecution against someone. That never happened. Most cases, the companies have just been deregistered. So we don't know what those companies were that the government claims. Were they just dead companies which nobody was using? Were they really shell companies? How much money was confiscated? So we don't know. So what we know is the government actually created a funnel that encouraged creation of shell companies if you wanted to hide yourself and provide money. So the third thing it did, which is fascinating, it allowed flow of foreign funding into Indian electoral politics, which did not exist earlier. So you have...
But that was a separate law, right? I mean,
it was a separate amendment done just as a package deal at that time, and electoral bonds were created.
So I would like to correct you here. So the foreign funding amendment was done in 2016, right? Through the finance bill in shady ways. Let's put it that way. And 2017 is when the electoral bonds were brought in, right?
So you've got these 2 steps which allow money to come in.
I'll just clarify it for the audience, right? So what they did in 2016 was that they said that now foreign companies which have 49% share in India 49% share outside, but 51% share of an Indian entity can now donate to political parties. So under the FCRA rules earlier, that was not allowed, right? Okay, go on.
So it's a package deal which allows complete anonymity, inability for not only the citizens but the institutions which need to track, say, the election commission, to not know who's paying to whom. So not only as we as citizens are not getting, but those in some sense hired by us to look after our interests, say the election commission, also do not come to know where the money is coming from and whom is going to.
I will get back. I'll come back a little bit clarification on the white money part, right?
Sure.
So another feature of white money, I'm using quotes now because thank you, and is that it's trackable, right? So I mean, all this shell company, whatever transfer, etc. is happening. Now, enforcement agencies like ED, etc., can track it, right? One of the things that the government and defenders of
the
electoral
possibility exists.
Yeah, possibility exists that a shell company is giving money, whatever it is. Like from the bank, at least they can be tracked wherever the money goes. So, isn't it a good thing that this trackability now exists and they're not really indulging in cash?
So there are fundamentally two flaws with this idea. One, who therefore has a handle on controlling where the money goes to and who it doesn't go to is the party in power, because we know how our enforcement agencies work. They can track down when the state tells them to crack down. Who they track down on, and the rules provide that they can just file any criminal case against anyone and investigate whether he or she has given any bonds, open up their cases, etc. So there's complete discretion available to the party in power as the state at that time, the executive at that time, to open up anyone's account. Yet, it is the one which is obviously therefore going to get most of the money. Two, there's a fundamental flaw which is more conceptual in where do you want to take your electoral democracy. A nature of electoral democracy is where all human citizens have equal rights to vote. It does not provide artificial entities like companies to be equivalent or higher than the citizen. Here, what you created is a channel where a corporate can pay humongous amounts to a political party. Obviously, for some return, it's not going to be done because I just like a friend.
Individuals can also buy it, right?
Individuals can also, but a corporate can then quietly, or an individual who runs a corporate can quietly, even a Hindu undivided family can, or a trust or an NGO can. But they can provide large sums of amount to a politician, which is obviously for a quid pro quo, and the citizens will not know. So obviously, that politician is then not answerable as much to the citizen as he should be or she should be. They're answerable as much to the corporates, and that's not the direction in which you want your democracy to go. If we had a flawed problem of electoral funding at the beginning, we've just actually quadrupled it up. We've actually built greater influence for corporates in this group, and the wealthy, whether it's an individual or a corporate or a HUF or whatever, we've created a special secret window for the wealthy to influence Indian politics. And that to me is perhaps fundamentally a scary idea and a direction to walk.
One more thing that here basically the point that people have been making, and I think a legitimate point that people have been making about electoral bonds is the windows that are available when you can buy it, right? So if we can talk about that a little, how an electoral bond cannot be just bought at any time. Right, there is a specific window which is 3 times in the year.
4 times in a normal year.
A 15-day window.
15-day window on a normal year.
On a normal year.
Sorry, a 10-day window and a 15-day encashment period after that.
Right. So like overall 25 days would be the window then?
Yeah, 10 plus 4, 40 days in a year. 10-day windows, 4 windows a normal year. So you have 40 days normally. In a year where you're going to hold elections for the Lok Sabha, for the parliament, the government is allowed to designate another 30 days of bond sale and purchase during that period.
Okay, so essentially these 40 days are when electoral bonds can be bought
and sold.
They can be redeemed later for a period. But these 40 days are essentially when this currency is operational, right? Which essentially means it's not a currency, right? I mean, a feature of a currency is that it can be used anytime, anywhere, and given to whoever you want. So if there is this limit of 10 day, which is 40 days, how do you still say that it is a dangerous idea that way?
So it's like, let me give you an analogy perhaps which might fit the bill. You have 200 milliliters of rain in a year, right? That can happen in 2 days and it can happen in 2 months. That's when we have a deluge. You could have a 10-day window and you could have 10,000 crores of bonds being created. You could have a 100 days window and you could have 20,000 crores worth of bonds being created. if you remember our first part of the series that Newslaundry, Huffington Post and others have carried, said the RBI said there's a fundamental problem with this. You will allow somebody else to create currency and that will destabilize our currency markets because you don't know how much would be created. Even reluctantly, when the government was forcing its bonds through and RBI had no option, it said at least do one small thing, put a cap on how much bonds can be bought and sold in a year. The government refused to do that, which again tells you that 40 days you don't know. So let me give an example. In the first tranche of this electoral bonds, we had 222 crores worth of bonds sold in the same period. In the last tranche, I think the second last tranche, which is the 11th, just before the general elections.
This is the year 2018, right?
This is 2018 March.
March, okay.
Just before the general elections, in the same 10-day window period, equivalent window period, we had 1,000 crores worth of bonds being sold. And there is no cap. If I have an empty stomach and I want to eat endless rice, in those 10-day windows, endless rice and money will flow.
Right.
And that destabilizes the market. You don't know where it's coming from. There is no cap whatsoever. And again, when you say a currency is something that lasts forever, that's not true. Promissory notes is what, this is basically a promissory note.
Yeah.
They are periodics. They are not a perpetual currency. They are currencies that exist for a particular time. So this exists for say 25 days.
Or unless demonetization
so this
happens.
is a 15-day. This is a 15-day currency. But within those 15 days, money in the market is not just a factor of how much currency exists, but with what velocity it changes hands between people. That's what in economic terms is called M3, or the total money that exists in a market at a certain time. If this 100 rupee note was to change hand 4 times, that's the volume of money you created, additional money you created. So if I buy a bond and give it to you because I want to hide who I really is, you can give it to him, you can give it to somebody else, etc., etc. You actually multiplying the virtual money that exists in the market, which is the worry that RBI had till the end, continued to have when it was overruled, as a part 1 shows, by the government.
So your first part is about how RBI opposed it.
Yes.
The second is about how Election Commission opposed it.
Yes, so that bit, the fact that the Election Commission opposed it had come out earlier because Election Commission had eventually gone before the Supreme Court and said, yes, we do have.
So O.P. Rawat was the one who had said, if I'm not wrong, in November 2018, that he had concerns about electoral bonds which were not addressed, right? I mean, he told that to the media also. So what are the sort of concerns that the Election Commission had about this?
Well, I think fundamental one, you remember when bureaucrats use words like concern, they're just saying I'm aghast. That's the way of saying what the hell is happening.
Okay, yeah.
So there were a couple of things that they were bothered about and seriously bothered about. One was that this would actually float black money into political parties. They said it just upfront, which is rare that they say it in so many words. Unlike RBI, they were impolite about it. 2, they said this is just exactly opposite of what you claim. This is not transparency. This is actually bringing complete opaqueness to the system. And 3, they said we actually had for a long while been telling you several reforms that need to be done, which you've never even touched. And you bypassed them and ignored them, never talked about them, while you created this, in some sense, over our bodies without even telling us that this was going to happen.
Right.
And again, they roughly reflect, except for the part about currency destabilization, which is RBI's remit, they mimic or exactly say what RBI had also said in the problems RBI had. So across 2 statutory, or at least 1 statutory, 1 constitutional authority, which is quasi-independent of the executive, they had similar grave concerns which they continue to have from the point that they came to know this was going to happen till date.
Okay.
Neither of them have changed their stance on this.
Okay.
So what we found in the second part, this was slightly came out because of, again, Commodore Lokesh Batra's retired public-spirited RTIs. What we figured out that once this was going to be revealed because a parliamentarian in the parliament asked questions about whether Election Commission has ever written to you about this, the government went and completely plain-facedly lied about it. They said, no, they've never written to us. And then Commodore brought out the fact that EC had written. Then they said, oh, I forgot, they had written to the law ministry, not to us.
Oh.
Then Commodore brought out saying they had also passed it on to you.
Yeah.
They said, oh yeah, they had passed it on to us, but we couldn't figure out because they didn't write directly to us.
Okay.
What we found out, only had they got the letter, they had actually met in person with the election commissioners, tried to lobby with them, which they kept confidential and secret till our papers brought it out.
Okay.
So they tried very hard to get them on board. When they couldn't, they just pretended as if it never happened, they never said
like
anything.
They never even talked to each other. Yeah.
So even till the last point, which is August 2019, when they finally are forced to make a correction in the parliament and say, yes, they did write to us. There's the last part of that question which said, what did you do to address it? Guess what the minister at that time tabled in parliament said? Nothing. They just didn't answer that. So we continue to be at the point where the government just pretends as if election commission never had serious fundamental concerns. They just kept on talking to them as if saying, अच्छा scheme को थोड़ा सा ऐसे change कर ले, ऐसे कर ले. While they're saying scheme होनी नहीं चाहिए.
Okay.
So that's what's happened over the last 2 years.
Right. Let's get to the unique number part of it, right? So as we said that the electoral bond has an amount and it is a bond and it has a unique number. So I think the Quint had brought this story out.
Poonam, a journalist in Quint, sorry I forget her surname.
Yeah.
She'd done this story, fascinating work. She bought a bond, took it to a forensic lab and said, look at it and tell me, is there something on it to trace it out? And they found that under UV light, there was a serial number there.
Okay.
And she then did this fantastic story saying, why is the serial number there? Does it? So she had questions at that time out of that serial number saying, does this actually mean are they tracking us? And the government came out very quickly after that because I think Indian Express wrote a query to Finance Ministry saying, what is this number for? Can you tell us? And the Finance Ministry, we got documents to show how they were trying to scramble and put a half truth out, not admit. So eventually they agreed and said, yes, there is a number, but do not worry, this number is never used to trace anyone or link up the donor to the political party. It has not been done and it will never be done.
Okay.
They brought out this, which was supposed to say, okay, this is only to make sure there are no forged bonds existing in the market. That's what they claim.
If I understand correctly, so this number which is on the bond, so SBI is issuing it. SBI is on the bond, right? So basically now the person who is donating sort of has a number and that same bond is going to a political party. So then that can be connected. So the donor can be connected to a party.
So not only
through the SBI
can be connected, the SBI formally wrote to the Finance Ministry and said, we will not do this scheme unless they are connected. Unless this secret number is used to connect them, because how will we keep an audit trail?
How is
it is anonymous to everyone except the government and the SBI, therefore. That's the story.
Okay, wait. Okay, no. So the thing is, they said that they will not do this scheme unless it's like trackable through the SBI.
So it's very logical. If I'm working like a bank.
I know it's logical from
a bank's perspective. How will I know where the money is going? I always, whenever you say deposit money in your mother's account, your mother sends it to you or me, the bank needs to track where money is going from there. So the bank said, how will we otherwise keep an audit of this? Say tomorrow morning, you say this was criminal activity and the enforcement agencies as per law come to us and say, tell me who gave it to whom. How will I come to know? And the law provides that when the enforcement agencies ask, you'll have to hand it over. So the SBI said, how will I run this scheme without this? And the Finance Ministry on record that we have provided now say, yes, we should have it. There is no other way around it.
I mean, it does make sense from the bank's perspective. I mean, like, नहीं तो फिर कोई भी बना लेगा electoral bond fraud.
So एक तो forgery हो सकता है, दूसरा basic audit trail of how does the banking system operate if you do not keep an accounting process?
At the end of the day, there is a transfer happening.
So there's no malice at the end of SBI. They're just saying, look, this is a bank, you are creating currency, there has to be a banking transaction record. The government, initially when it planned this, it did not even know what it was doing. It just wanted a secret bond, it did not know how it would happen. So this scheme was created much after it had already been passed by law. And by that time, SBI was saying there is no other way. And remember, they went to SBI because RBI had already said, please do not do it from anywhere else. Let only RBI handle it. This is scary stuff. And they just ignored RBI and went to SBI thinking they might be more malleable because we know how SBI works. It's a public sector bank owned by the government. And we now have evidence of how closely the scheme has been actually run by the government through the SBI. We produced enough evidence in several parts of the series on it. So the government said, oops, it's true. How do they run this without having a serial number? So let's just keep it as a secret serial number. And when people ask these questions in public, it just lied. So what happens consequently is, again, it proves the point that the only one who knows what's happening is the party in power. Everyone else knows nothing about who is giving money to whom. The moment the government believes we should figure out who's giving money to someone, the enforcement agency can actually, as the rule says, file a criminal law case. Not about what? A criminal case, and then ask for information from SBI transactions का log lao.
And that can be any criminal case.
It just says a criminal case.
Oh, they're not defined what kind of
No.
criminal case. And then the donor who is giving the electoral bond also doesn't know it that.
So the rules do not say that they have to be informed that their privacy is being breached. The party has not to be informed that their privacy has been breached, which the government promised to them.
But then those are the two parties where the transaction is happened. How can they not be informed?
Well, if the enforcement director decides, they might inform them, which obviously means the state, the finance ministry and others. But if they decide not to because they're just doing a good investigation,
right,
they will not.
Okay, so essentially...
And criminal cases are also sometimes filed for against anonymous people because the investigative agency has not found out who is doing what.
Right.
So they do file a P and an FIR and say, we do not know who are the real criminals, but something has happened, we'll go tracing out. So you can file a case theoretically right now against anonymous people, go to SBI and say, for this tranche, tell us all the bonds sold. And the SBI legally is mandated, required, and it's compulsory for them to share that information with the enforcement agencies.
Okay, that's very interesting, I must say. So you said that right now there are 6,270 crore worth, roughly, right?
Yeah.
So one of our reporters, Ayush Tiwari, he went to the press conference that was held recently by the Congress, right? Based on your stories, actually. So there he asked them, will you reveal the names of your donors, because they have also used electoral bonds to get money.
They have got some
right.
as well.
So we went in with the idea that they had taken some 5 crore because we based it on the old story where 95% of the donations have gone to BJP. But then we were corrected and Ayush was corrected and they said they have gotten 500 crore worth of money. Right?
I think the amount is slightly less, but somewhere in that ballpark figure.
Okay. So the Congress has used electoral bonds, but it's still opposing it. The BJP has used electoral bonds. They're saying nothing about it. Other parties might be using electoral bonds and doing it. So I just want to understand from this whole dynamic here, who is going to oppose this? I mean, the Congress is opposing it. The opposition parties are opposing it, but they're also using it. So how does that work?
So I think there are 2 layers to this in terms of how political parties are maneuvering themselves around it. One is political parties, whether they like, it's not as if Congress did great deal in its history of cleaning up the dirty cash in the system. But all political parties would prefer to create a level playing field amongst themselves, if nothing else, if not transparency.
Yeah.
Like, agar somebody can come and give you 500 crores, the chap should have equal opportunity to give it to me also if he or she likes.
Right.
That is what a political party, even if you think more cynically, would at least prefer.
Yeah.
2 is in some sense, a more practical politics of saying electoral bonds has already created an uneven playing field where the party in power we know is getting a maximum amount of it, has a complete handle on it, breaks laws under the instructions of the Prime Minister when it wants to collect money, does several other things which are in contravention of their own existing laws to get money. Now, other opposition parties are dealing with this.
Right.
At this stage, if they say this is legal, I will not even take this in the name of austerity or whatever.
Right.
You're actually making sure then they die out.
Right.
Because BJP will say, we always believe this is good money, so we'll keep on taking millions and millions while you guys don't take a penny.
Right.
So it just is unfair in some sense. It's a false equivalence. I think if you, at this juncture, tell Congress, I think it's a good thing to ask opposition parties, given an opportunity, will you vote against this? If the BJP declares the names of its donors, will you declare the name of your donors? These are legit questions to ask. Are you fundamentally against electoral bonds? That's a good question to ask, I think. And it should be asked for everyone. Several people have gone. Let me give you another example that we were talking of, in fact, earlier. What these bonds has done is reduce the window for small new parties to collect money.
So regional outfits, smaller
say
regional
I'm just
outfits.
starting off 4 of you find 2 more friends and we start a party.
Right. How do you say that is happening?
I'll tell you how. Say 4 of us decide to set up a party. Obviously, we'll first go around our mohallas, our regions and say, give us 100 rupees, 1000 rupees. My uncle who can give me 1 lakh rupees, you collect that.
Right.
Now, as a small party, I will not get it from the corporate side. I'm just a little kid starting off on the block. Those guys cannot give me cash anymore. They will only have to give me below 2000, remember? Or their names come up and then the big guys can go and bash them up anyway. Right?
Yeah.
But the big guys can get big amounts, bigger and bigger amounts in complete secrecy. So what it does, it creates an unbalanced field for the younger, smaller regional parties which are coming up. it creates in some sense a disbalance. And we remember we do have deep histories of couple of parties playing far bigger roles and taking over politics of states. We do not have a very federated system of politics even now. It prevents us from becoming a better democracy in some sense.
So newer parties will obviously find it difficult to sort of come into the field and say do the same things that bigger parties are. And electoral bonds are in a way making it even worse.
Electoral bonds are fundamentally meant for those who are in power. For the party who's in power. There's complete logic of why obviously it would be meant for them.
Right.
That say a party like Congress gets some money. I think Trinamool's also got some money from what I've seen in Honest report. It's fair. Wherever they're regionally slightly powerful, they'll also get some.
Yeah.
So the worry is that if this gets institutionalized and we do not as citizens raise it up at the moment, some other parties in power 5 years, 10 years down the line, I think they'll fall in as much love with it as BJP does right now.
Right.
And as citizens, we have to govern ourselves and limit ourselves against that risk. That something which was earlier, remember, cash was illegal. It was not legal to give large amounts of cash. What we've done now is we've actually legalized giving large amount of black money through secret channels. So what at least principally or at least on paper looked like it was wrong thing, now it's legitimized as legal. So you can't even prosecute anyone for influencing our politics.
Right. Last question. So what has the reaction for your story been from the mainstream media? So I think you were on NDTV and you were on India Today as well. But in general, how is the media approaching this whole electoral bonds issue? And it has been, there since 2017, but now because of your stories, it's coming up again. How have they approached it? What are you seeing?
Two very strange trends. We've had this stereotype of saying, at least in India, different print organizations still continue to do some journalism. TV is really bad, it just does this talk shop and it doesn't talk. Oddly, in this case, a few channels, I won't say like a substantial amount, one or two have begun to at least discuss this. A couple of them have done it well, a couple of them have not. They're also grappling with this issue as it boils over. Our series is also coming out, so new revelations keep challenging them, I think. I like to take that credit. But surprisingly, not a single newsprint legacy organization has touched this issue with a barge pole except for Hindu, which has done one story, I think, day before, which was a fantastic story.
Is it also because it's in like a particular publication, so therefore we can't take the same story?
Well, frankly, if they came to me today and said, will you hand over all the papers, I would give it.
Right.
I would not give a damn. I think this is far more important than me claiming 2 days glory of saying I've got these documents, because these are anyway not mine. These are Commodore Lokesh Batra's.
So journalists who are looking at it and want to do a story, come to him, he'll give you documents. Just say.
So I will actually put all of them out. Right. And I know for a fact that I have not actually been able to trawl through the entire 700, 800 pages we have. I promise they'll be put out very soon. Anyone who wants to go at it.
Are you going to open source these documents?
Yes, they'll be in public domain. I'm also willing to put out my email. Anyone who wants help in reading them, I'm going to be available for that. Because I don't think this is just a story for us.
Right. And how many documents are there exactly?
On last count, and I just got another tranche day before night, I think there are about 940 pages.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, you need help, basically.
We need people to do this. I don't think... Again, good journalism is about, there's a chance you might break a story tomorrow, but I should be following it up if I believe it's important.
Right.
I would not judge the editors of newspapers saying what their news judgment is, whether this is big or not. But one would presume that if entire population is, the entire opposition is holding press conferences, talking about it, even if the press should have led it and hadn't, they would at least report on the opposition cribbing about it. If it did not get a lead, whatever, it could at least write an op-ed about it, which most papers do to cover up for the fact that they don't like to actually break news, because that rubs the government off even worse. Right. So you do an op-ed on the 7th day. So I'm presuming, unfortunately, that we might find a couple of papers 10 days down the line saying, no, this should not happen, and go on with life. But the fact is, it's quite, even by standards that I've seen so far, and I've suffered for doing these kind of stories in the past, it's more reflective on us as a fraternity than the opposition or the citizenry. The fact that, say, Newslaundry collaborated with Huffington Post, the fact that Dhartri, an Odia paper, collaborated with us.
Oh, Dharitri is also
Joined us and is publishing it from
Fun
day
fact,
before.
Tathagat Satpathy, who I used to work with, in 2017, I was in Parliament when this was
I
passed.
remember.
He was one of the few people who had opposed electoral bonds.
So they're publishing it. There's a Tamil online website which is publishing it now. There's a Maharashtrian website which has reached out, said we want to translate it.
Oh.
There's a Manipuri which wants to translate. There's a Khasi which is translating. There's an Arunachali which is going out.
Wow, okay.
There's a Gujarati we just beginning to talk. They reached out to us saying we want to do this. I think citizens want to know it. It's not as if, this claim that citizens don't get bothered by this stuff. They want to know what's happening. Is there nala working in the backyard? Citizens want both. They want their nalas fixed. They also want their democracy fixed. I think there is vested interest in the business of journalism, not in individual journalists. The brilliant individual journalists across the board, who I think if the editors unleashed, would go at it and perhaps do a much better job than we could do as a collective as well.
So I think open sourcing those documents is actually a great idea. Journalists, are you listening?
We should. I mean, it's not our document. This is the Government of India's document, which means it belongs to the public. We've got it under RTI. There is no secrecy. Why should I keep it to myself?
Absolutely.
Share it with everyone.
Absolutely.
Let's everyone take a look at it.
Thank you so much for your time, Nitin. This has been wonderful.
Pleasure.
And what are you planning next?
A break?
A break, yes. You deserve one. Yeah, you deserve one. But thank you so much for taking out the time, and thank you for collaborating with Newslaundry for those stories. And if you want to read the stories, they are on Newslaundry Hindi. They are in 5 parts. They have been released over the last week. So please go and read them. And as always, subscribe so that we can survive and keep doing stories like Nitin does here. We can keep collaborating.
Can I pitch in also?
Yes, please.
They've been other lovely partners who worked with us and labored so hard. So I want to credit them and thank them for the Huffington Post, obviously, which has led these for us. Then we've got the Malayalam Arigam, which has done. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at pronouncing Malayalam words, but they've done fantastic work in translating superbly, just like you've done in Hindi. The Odia papers, which has just become Dharitri, which you talked about. And Rayat, which is a Khasi English website, and Meghnad, which is picking it up and translating it. The others, I'm told today, the lead is going to translate it into Telugu and take it out from tomorrow onwards. It's important. These are new forms of collaborations. We don't need to look outside. And when I think yesterday somebody said, mainstream journalism is not touching it. We are the mainstream.
You are the mainstream.
Anyone who does journalism is mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely.
The others are the side streams.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and probably they're not carrying enough water at the moment.
Absolutely. So support independent journalism, support all these organizations who are doing great work, support Newslaundry, and subscribe and pay to keep news free, because when you pay, we can do stories like these which challenge the government, and we work for you, not the government or any corporate house which is buying electoral bonds and influencing the government. But still, pay to keep news free. And I believe Nitin also has a subscription appeal for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look at exactly the appeal that he's making from free media should be also made for how our elections are run. The less we have corporates paying for our elections and more we have citizens contributing in different ways, you'll have much freer elections and politics that responds to your demands and not of a few powerful rich people.
Right. Thank you so much, Nitin. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for stretching this.